I chased Jessica for 5 years, even changed my job from a surgeon to a regular flight doctor for her. In the 5th year, she proposed to me in front of everyone. People were envious. I stood strong, and finally my persistence paid off. The most beautiful captain at Southern Airlines couldn't resist a bit of charm. But on our engagement party day, I caught Jessica and her neighbor's brother James hiding in a corner. "Is this the only way I could see you, by getting engaged to him?" Jessica said. James gave her a gentle shove. "You're engaged now. Stop this." "Stop what?" Jessica smirked and moved closer to him. "2 years ago, you left without a word. James, you've changed. You're more bold now." An electric tension hung between them as James moved closer, resting his hands on her waist. "You kissed him, and I saw," he grumbled. Jessica hooked her arm around his neck. "Jealous much? You said we're just siblings." James looked annoyed. "We are. Now let me go. I need to toast to your fiancé." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Siblings?" she said, then stood on her toes and kissed him hard. James blushed, eyes misty. Jessica whispered, "Do siblings kiss like this?" James flirtatiously untied his tie. "It doesn't stop at kissing," he said. They started kissing passionately. The storage room filled with the rustling sound of clothes. Soft moans echoed. Standing outside, my face was pale, fingernails digging into my palm, but I felt no pain. Just as things heated up, Jessica stopped James from unclipping her bra. "James, it's my engagement day. It's not right." Disappointed, James let go while Jessica touched up her makeup with a mirror. When Jessica turned around, almost meeting my eyes through the door gap, I instinctively pulled away. I have no idea how I made it back to the banquet hall in that daze. After the engagement ceremony, Jessica and I took turns toasting each table of guests. James, in a white suit after 2 years abroad, suddenly appeared before Jessica and me. He took a glass, smiling broadly. "Congrats on the engagement." Though he spoke to both of us, he only had eyes for Jessica. As he finished, I felt Jessica's grip on my hand tighten. I frowned slightly, hearing her grit her teeth. "Finally decided to show up, huh?" she said. James swirled his drink. "Of course, I couldn't miss something as big as your engagement." Annoyed, Jessica furrowed her brow and swiftly dragged him toward the exit. Left behind, I stared blankly at my palm, still warm from her touch. Some of Jessica's friends noticed the tension between us and tried to lighten the mood. "No worries. Jessica's just catching up with James. It's been years. She's all about you now, don't worry." Their comforting words helped a bit, but a discordant voice chimed in. "James and Jessica grew up together, you know. Their folks even joked about James being her future husband. Too bad someone couldn't resist kissing Jessica, making James upset enough to leave." "Cindy, stop it." Jessica chose Edward. "Not your business." After some bickering, the chaos around me intensified. There were piercing comments directed at me, and I felt like a defeated soldier fleeing a battlefield. James and Jessica's dad were like brothers in arms, both ex-Air Force. After a tragic accident claimed James' dad, and his mom passed from a heart attack soon after, James came to live with Jessica's family. I honestly believed their sibling relationship was genuine until James caught us kissing and left the country. That's when I realized he always liked her. People thought that first kiss at the bar was my doing. But really, Jessica leaned in, tipsy, whispering, "Edward, you're so cute." I blushed, frozen in place. She saw my embarrassment, teasing me, her finger tracing my features. Her eyes on my lips, she asked if she could kiss me. Caught off guard, I asked, "Kiss what?" My ear stung from her light bite. Taken aback, I gasped, and her gaze deepened, hot breath against my skin. "Can I kiss you?" Facing the woman I'd always admired, I got lost in her eyes, forgetting my objections. Sensing my silent approval, she gently cupped my face, and the air felt alive with her touch. Her lips grazed my blushed ears, then towards my mouth. Right then, James burst in, and she pulled away like lightning. He yelled, "Do you really like him? Why didn't you push him away?" Jessica lay back on the sofa, her tone nonchalant. "James, who I like is none of your business." Weren't you telling everyone we're just like siblings? It was that comment that made James resolute about leaving the country for 2 years. No matter how hard Jessica tried to find him, he refused to show up. The scene in the storage room haunts my mind like a nightmare. I never thought Jessica would go that far. But what about me? What am I to her? I couldn't help but recall that kiss from 2 years ago. Thinking back, it was probably Jessica's way of getting back at James after seeing another guy confess to him. She kissed me to spite him. That guy asked James, "What's your relationship with Jessica?" He simply replied, "Just siblings." Jessica got mad because of that explanation, planned to kiss me, and made sure James would see it. And there I was, foolishly thinking maybe she really had feelings for me. Turns out it was all just to get back at James. After James left, Jessica publicly started getting close to me. Everyone at South Airlines thought she genuinely liked me. She'd bring me breakfast before work, make sure to schedule her pilot's checkups in the same office as mine, and never missed giving gifts on holidays, big or small. I believed her connection with James was purely sibling-like. But now, 5 years later, the sound of my broken dream is deafening, leaving me nearly in despair. Jessica's heart has always been with James. I was just a clown standing in their way. Half an hour later, Jessica reappeared in the hall, holding my hand and smiling at the guests. I can't figure out why she's still doing this. James is back. What's the point of keeping this up? I think about their passionate kiss in the storage room, and my stomach churns painfully. Instinctively, I pull my hand away from hers. "What's wrong?" she asks. Seeing that hint of concern in her eyes, my heart stings sharply. Even now, I want to keep some semblance of dignity between us. After the party, some of Jessica's friends organized a gathering for James. In the private room, laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. I felt like an outsider, out of place in this lively scene. After several rounds of drinks, someone spoke up. "James, if you hadn't left for 2 years, you and Jessica might have." Someone quickly covered the speaker's mouth. The atmosphere turned awkward as eyes turned to me, Jessica, and James. Jessica pulled out a cigarette, irritation in her eyes. "Had too much to drink? Go home." It was clear to everyone that Jessica was upset, and nobody dared to speak except James. He leisurely poured himself a drink. "So the rumors are true, you do have deep feelings for Edward. Can't even take a joke about him." Jessica kept silent but handed me James' drink. "Edward, it's been years. Let's have a drink." I met his gaze calmly, speaking softly, "Yeah, long time no see. My best friend." But just as I reached for the glass, Jessica snatched it first. "His stomach can't handle it, I'll drink it." Hearing this, James's eyes reddened. One of Jessica's friends tugged at her sleeve. "James just had a gastroscopy last night. Take care of him too." She paused for a moment, but as she moved to take James' glass, he downed the liquor, coughing from the burn. "You've changed," he said, eyes red, before storming out. Everyone urged Jessica to go after him. She hesitated until her friend Cindy spoke up. "Jessica, go after him. Everyone knows James returned for you. Are you going to break his heart again like 2 years ago?" Without any more hesitation, she followed him out. Watching her leave, my hands clenched tightly, knuckles white. As her figure vanished, my gaze grew cold, like ashes after a fire. After Jessica left, Cindy smugly said, "Some things just aren't yours to dream about. It'll only end in heartache." I forced a cold smile. Better than being too scared to dream at all. Cindy, I knew from college, had always followed James around. My words hit a nerve, and she turned pale, keeping silent this time. Some mutual friends stepped in. "Don't be mad at Jessica. She always saw James as a brother, you know that. She just went after him because she was worried." I stayed quiet. As her friends thought they smoothed things over, I calmly said, "Tell Jessica, our engagement is off." The next day, as I dragged myself to work in a daze, Jessica stormed into my office. "Edward, what are you doing?" I glanced at her coolly. "Here for a checkup?" "I don't handle that." Right out the door and to the right. Having just finished a flight, she still wore her uniform, visibly tired. Her jaw tightened briefly, then she softened. "Edward, it was sudden last night. You know how James can be." I was worried. You understand, right? I countered. Understand what? Seeing that I didn't care about her feelings at all, Jessica frowned angrily. James is just my brother. We're both engaged. Do you have to target him like this? The anger I had been holding back flared up instantly. I threw the documents on the table at her and jumped to my feet. Do siblings kiss? That was her phrase, and now I tossed it right back at her. Jessica seemed a bit startled. Her expression froze, and silence fell between us. Just then, James barged in without any warning. He naturally wrapped his arm around Jessica's shoulders, his eyes gleaming with provocation. Since you saw us that day, we might as well not hide it from you. Edward, I've liked Jessica ever since I was a kid. If she hadn't got annoyed and gotten engaged to you as a mistake 2 years ago, you wouldn't have stood a chance. James' words hit me like a punch to the chest. I tried to smile, but it felt forced. When I first got into college, James was the first good friend I made. Back then, he was bright and outgoing, while I was shy and reserved. Despite our different personalities, we became the best of friends. I even told him about a girl I had a crush on ever since middle school. My neighbor's house caught fire, and it spread to ours. I was trapped in the bathroom, barely hanging on. Then this girl broke in and rescued me. James had been amazed at the story. That's straight out of a TV drama. You gotta find her and be with her. Until one day, Jessica came to our class after school to wait for James. I looked at her and instantly recognized her as the girl who saved me. When I told James, he was speechless. Then, he patted his chest and promised, Edward, don't worry. I'm here to help you win over my sister. I was so touched. I gave him a hug, unable to voice my gratitude. Thanks to James constantly setting us up, Jessica and I slowly grew closer. But when did things change? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. I just remember James started resisting when the three of us would walk home together. Then he began to badmouth me in front of Jessica and get other dorm mates to isolate me. I thought I must have done something wrong, so I confronted him about it, until I saw him hugging Jessica, crying his heart out, don't love anyone else, just me, alright? Jessica back then might not have had romantic feelings for James. She rejected him firmly and coldly, saying, I only see you as a brother. Her rejection gave me the strength to keep pursuing her. Their actions now were so natural, like they'd always been this close. I looked at her, heartbroken, and said coldly, Jessica, let's call off the engagement. Jessica's gaze fixed on mine, her dark eyes slightly broken. Are you sure? Then a trace of anger crossed her face, and she hissed, no way. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my anger, and said calmly, it's not just your call whether we break up or not. You really want a divorce? Jessica challenged, but seeing no reaction from me, her face flushed with anger. She swept the documents off the table, papers scattered everywhere. My heart twitched painfully when I saw a lone medical record lying in the corner. Fighting back the heat in my eyes, I pointed to the door coldly. Get out. Jessica opened her mouth as if to speak but was pulled away by James. As they left, James turned back, glaring, Edward, this time I won't let you take my sister away. After they left, the strength left my body, and I slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor, hugging my arms, unable to hold back the stabbing pain. Back when the fire hit, we were blocked by a fallen beam. I was so suffocated by smoke that I was losing consciousness. Jessica talked to me to keep me awake, and joked that if we made it out alive, I'd owe her big time. I mumbled my agreement. When she wiped the soot from my face, she smirked and said, how about you repay me by marrying me? Jessica's words snapped me back to reality, clearing the smoky haze in my mind. We held on until the firefighters rescued us. My thoughts started to drift back. As I left the hospital, my weak body made me dizzy, and I was about to fall. Suddenly, someone caught me from behind. I looked up, surprised. It was a familiar face, Emily. She was in a white coat, smiling softly. I got to my feet, shocked. Emily? She folded her arms, casually nodding. Long time no see, Edward. What brings you here? Halfway through my question, I realized, of course, Emily would be here. Back in med school, she was the top student, so being at a top hospital only made sense. I heard you became a flight surgeon. What a waste of talent for someone as gifted as you. You were my only real competition back then. I sheepishly touched my nose. Stop flattering me. I haven't held a scalpel in ages. Emily leaned against the wall, mock glaring at me. You know, suddenly she turned serious. Edward, you need to return to the OR. I hesitated. The words slipped out. I can't. It's been too long. Hey, don't rush to turn me down just yet. I'm a chief physician now, and I have 2 recommendation spots open. Give it a thought. I'll always have a spot here for you. Her gaze was tender, full of endless warmth as she stared right at me. I was taken aback for a moment, a slight smile creeping into my eyes. I'll think about it, I said. Emily's eyes suddenly deepened when I finally seemed to ease up, her smile growing even wider than before. I'll wait for you. Just then, an angry Jessica appeared by my side. Her cold stare fell on Emily, and she spoke through gritted teeth. Edward, is this why you've been wanting to break off our engagement? Emily's eyes flashed a warning. Back off. Jessica looked at her with blatant disdain. He's my fiancé, not yours to worry about. Not anymore. Jessica turned to me, clearly shocked, as I pulled free from her. The engagement is off. I'm not your fiancé anymore, Jessica. Emily nudged her aside, nearly causing Jessica to lose her balance. Edward, say it again if you dare. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady. I could say it 100 times, Jessica. I'm not your fiancé anymore. Jessica seemed like she wanted to say more, but then a crisp voice cut in. James hurried to Jessica's side, whispering, Where'd you go? I already got the x-rays done. The doctor said it's just a minor cut, nothing serious, he added. As they chatted as if nobody else was around, James suddenly called out to me just when I was about to leave. Did you accept Emily's proposal? She's liked you since college, you know. I froze, fists clenching. That's between us. Keep others out of it, James. Sure, Emily liked me back in school, but that was college. Back then, all I thought about was Jessica. I wasn't interested in anyone else, I replied. James was just trying to stir the pot by dragging Emily into it. But as soon as I said that, Emily spoke up with a nonchalant voice. I liked you back in college, and I still do now. Her words stopped my breath, my mind blank as I met her deep gaze. James looked pleased, tugging at Jessica's sleeve. See? Emily's head over heels for Edward. Jessica shook his hand off, stepping toward me. Edward, let's pretend nothing happened today. Come with me now. She'd pretend nothing happened, but I couldn't. I laughed bitterly. Jessica, stop pretending. Your little brother's back. You don't need to pretend to be with me just to lure him out. She seemed unfazed, tugging me along with the last strands of patience gone. But just when I was about to pull free, Jessica jerked her hand, and I fell hard on the ground, pain shooting through my belly. James sneered at me. Now when did you learn to fake injuries, Edward? Jessica scolded me impatiently. Get up, Edward. But the severe twist of pain in my abdomen stopped me cold, clutching it until my fingers turned white. Emily knelt beside me, full of concern instead of lifting me up. You okay? I nodded, and just as Emily reached out to help, my legs gave out, and I knew something was wrong. Jessica stood frozen, thunderstruck. Emily's worried voice rose. Don't worry, I'll get a doctor. After the checkup, the doctor said I needed rest before recovering fully. Jessica stood there listlessly. Outside the hospital, she turned to me, eyes red, voice trembling slightly. What else are you hiding from me? Rubbing my temples from exhaustion, I replied, Why does it matter to you? Jessica's voice rose sharply. How could you not tell me something so serious? Her shouting only unraveled the tightly wound tension inside me, my chest heaving with anger. What's the point? Did you consult me when you kissed your brother at our engagement party? Rain started falling, thin and cold, matching the chill of autumn. Jessica and I stood there in the downpour. She snapped finally, Edward, you can't get over this. Can you? Looking at the anger in her eyes, I lost any will to argue. She never cared about my feelings or my respect. I liked her, sure, but it was supposed to be mutual. She never put me where I belonged. This whole time, I was just a stray dog to her, calling me close, pushing me away on a whim. She gave me scraps of affection, and I'd come running. She was always on her high horse. Did she really think I'd never leave? Caught in this tense moment, James approached with an umbrella. "Let's go home. It's cold out here." He coughed, lips pale. "James, go on ahead to the car." James nodded, rain pouring down on me in icy sheets. I felt a chill run deeper than just skin. Jessica's gaze was void of warmth. Think about it. Then she got in the car with James, driving off, leaving me standing in the rain. James tossed an umbrella from the car window at my feet. His voice dripped with feigned concern. "I just got out of the hospital, so take care. Keep the AC warm." I caught the sarcasm in his words and didn't reach for the umbrella. The hospital's location was already out of the way, and now it was raining in the evening. Jessica didn't consider how hard it was for me to get a cab. She just left me on the side of the road, pretending it was for my reflection. Ridiculous. In this dreary weather, it hit me. Every time we argued, Jessica handled it the same way. She'd try to soothe me, but if I didn't back down, she'd get even angrier, even when it was clearly her fault. Back then, I was so blinded by love I didn't see anything wrong. I just thought she liked keeping up appearances. I even made excuses, counting the occasional good things she did, fooling myself. Now it's like waking from a long dream. I have to ask myself, how could loving someone mean never bowing down to them? I guess it just meant not being important. Jessica might have had some fondness for me after meeting James, but it didn't compare to her pride, or how much she dotes on her little brother. My phone showed I had been waiting for a ride for 10 minutes, but no driver had accepted yet. I was shivering in the cold, and as I considered going back to the hospital for shelter, a silver car appeared. Emily rolled down the window, urging, "Edward, hop in. Aren't you off work?" I asked, grateful. "No rush, I can take you home," she replied. As I got in, Emily sighed gently, a look of sympathy in her eyes. "That jerk really left you like this," she muttered. I gave a bitter smile but stayed quiet. Suddenly, she grabbed my cold hand, her warmth surprising me. My heart skipped, eyes fluttering as I quickly withdrew. The car still wasn't moving. Emily looked at my pale cheeks. Her hand hesitated mid-air then dropped in restraint. "Come stay with me. I'll be there for you," she offered softly. "And getting back into surgery was always your dream, right?" I pressed my lips together, staying silent under her expectant gaze. The sudden ring of my phone shattered the quiet. Jessica's raging voice boomed. "Edward, I came back for you. Where are you?" I inhaled deeply, tightening my grip on the phone. "So just because you came back, I'm supposed to wait for you?" I snapped. Emily leaned closer, and in that proximity, I noticed her long lashes and pale fuzz on her face. I held my breath. Suddenly, click, the seatbelt locked around me. "Don't be nervous. It's just a seatbelt," she chuckled. Jessica's furious voice filled the car. "Edward, are you with that bitch, Emily?" I ignored her outburst and hung up. 2 weeks later, I wrapped up my resignation. Jessica found out and stormed into my office. "Edward, you're really jumping into another woman's arms that fast?" she yelled. I didn't look up, organizing my desk instead. Frustrated by my silence, Jessica shredded my sorted documents. Watching the paper fall, I trembled with anger and slapped her hard across the face. "What's wrong with you? Do you think I need your permission to leave? We're done," I spat. Jessica stayed frozen, red-eyed, whispering, "Edward, we had issues, but I can fix them. Don't let someone else ruin this." Hearing fear in Jessica's voice was a first. "She worried about losing me now? I took the aviation job for you, but I'm leaving for myself this time," I declared, tapping my chest. "Just me. Got it?" She stammered another question, but I cut her off coldly. "Don't assume everyone is as scheming as you," I said. "I'm moving to a hospital that's not Emily's. I'm doing this on my own. You need to move on, Jessica. You're only upset because I stopped liking you. James was always your choice. I was just a sideshow. I liked you, But I'm not desperate. Jessica clenched her fists, trembling with effort. Her voice cracked. You don't like me anymore? Of all I said, that's what hit her? I didn't see the point in talking more, turning to leave. Her voice, softer, reached me again. Edward, give me one last chance. Please, one more. I paused, but in the end, I walked away. After joining a new hospital, I dived into my work. Doing what I loved improved my mood tremendously. Lately, the dean often praised my abilities. I finally qualified to hold the scalpel again. Emily treated me to dinner as a celebration. How could I say no to that? After dinner, when she dropped me off at home, we talked a bit more in the car about some professional stuff. She looked at me with such admiration. Edward, she said, I knew suggesting that path for you wasn't wrong. Then she reached out to touch my head. Keep it up. I smiled sheepishly. Unlike Jessica's rough ways, Emily's care is always so subtle. She never forces you to return her feelings, nor does she use moral reasoning to tie you down. It's like she's saying, be brave and move forward. I'm always behind you. As soon as I came home, I was hit by a strong smell of smoke. No lights in the living room. A woman's silent figure sat on the couch. Dim red lights glowed on the coffee table. I flipped the switch and the lights flooded the room. Jessica squinted at the sudden brightness. Jessica, you're trespassing, it's illegal. She ignored me and spoke eerily. What were you talking about with that other woman? You seemed so happy. Without a word from me, she sprang up in a flash, pinning me against the wall. Her fierce kiss tasted bitter with smoke, storming through my mouth. Instantly, I imagined her passionately kissing James in a storage room. A wave of nausea hit my throat. Jessica sensed something off. When she let go, I darted to the bathroom, gagging over the toilet. Jessica stood like a broken statue at the bathroom door, stunned. Trembling, she spoke, Edward, do you hate me this much now? Just then, chaos erupted outside. The fire alarm blared through the building. Fire! Run! Get out! Baby cries, rushing footsteps, and desperate cries for help created chaos. Jessica and I turned back in shock as flames licked at the balcony. Old scary memories rushed back. She held me tightly, comforting, don't be scared. The fire department is here. It's not a big deal. Luckily, our apartment isn't high up. While waiting for help, Jessica fashioned sheets and blankets into a rope for escape. That settled my frantic mind a bit. Suddenly, her phone rang with James' desperate voice. Jessica, I give you 20 minutes. If you don't come, I'll jump from the roof. I came back knowing you don't like me anymore. You ended up with him despite all my efforts. But I won't bless you too. You're my sister alone. The video showed James teetering on a rooftop, dozens of stories high. Jessica's heart clenched. She glanced at the approaching flames, then at my pale face. Finally, she said, sorry, the firefighters are next door. They'll be here soon. The rope is ready, be careful. With no hesitation, she climbed out the window, scaling down the makeshift rope. Watching her determined back disappear, I collapsed. Jessica, who once plunged into flames for me, now left me alone in danger. I realized a heart that seemed dead still could hurt. After several tries, I overcame my fear and clambered out before the flames spread. My fear of heights and trauma made my head ring as I climbed. Several times I nearly lost my grip and fell. Luckily, Emily arrived on a ladder to rescue my panic-stricken self. After that, I never saw Jessica again. The hospital, impressed with my performance, decided to transfer me to the headquarters in another city. I heard Jessica hurried back to find James lounging at home eating fruit. Furious, she slapped him, then rushed back to my site. Failing to reach me by phone, and with unclear info on my whereabouts, she climbed the ladder into my building through flames, searching desperately. Eventually, a collapsed beam trapped her until firefighters rescued her. Barely alive, calling my name. Jessica spent weeks in hospital with severe burns on her back, repeatedly calling me, only to be hung up on every time. The last time I saw Jessica was at the airport. She learned about my departure but unsure of my flight. She took a day off to wait for me. 2 months later, Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Seeing me, she rasped, "Edward." I stayed indifferent. "You have a stone-cold heart," I finally replied, "but not as cold as yours." She looked down. "It's my fault. That doesn't matter now." As I moved to leave, she suddenly stopped me. "Can you tell me why you didn't come to the concert in junior year?" I paused. "What concert?" She smiled bitterly. "March 5th, during that torrential rain." Squinting, I remembered. That day, the city faced a record storm. Roads were paralyzed, howling winds, rain pouring, and communication down. Jessica's voice grew softer. "I planned to confess to you, but James told me you knew and avoided me to let me down easy." I froze. Mentioning James connected all my confusion. Suddenly, her past coldness and flirty behavior with James made sense. Imagining her waiting proudly, only to feel humiliated, stung at my heart. Calmly, I stated, "Jessica, I never set a date with you that day. Ask your dear brother if you have questions. Only he messed with my phone." Jessica's face went pale as my words sank in. Her eyes were filled with betrayal. She clutched her chest, gasping as if waking from a nightmare. "We were so close." I spoke evenly. "The issue was never that, almost. You never valued others' feelings." As I finished, the boarding call chimed. In her stunned eyes, I walked away. Before boarding, I glanced at the flight number on my ticket. This was supposed to be her flight today. Jessica heard the announcement too. Squatting in the bustling airport, she cried, masked by the crowd. Even the chance to see you off slipped through my fingers.